The New York Mets salvage a series victory in dramatic fashion. Welcome into episode 2 of the Bleav in the Mets podcast. Chris Schubert, Jack McKessie here with you. When we were just talking in the pre-show, Jack, of how different of a tone this podcast would have taken if the Mets got no hit in that game on Wednesday. If you even threw out there, Francisco Lindor hits the home run and then they give it away in the bottom of the ninth. But we don't have any of that to discuss. We have a series victory to discuss here today on the podcast as the New York Mets take 2 out of 3 from the Toronto Blue Jays. And as we record this show, in sole possession of the third and final wild card in the National League.
Feels pretty good. That was the series that we said going in was one that the Mets desperately needed to take, and they took care of business. Game 1 by the skin of their teeth and some luck from the opposing bullpen, and then Game 3 in dramatic fashion. And then, like you said, sole possession of that third wild card spot. Shout out to the Washington Nationals for doing some of the Mets work for them, beating the Braves.
Let's go through these games one by one, and then we will preview what is one of the tougher series that this team has remaining on their schedule. Their first of 7 games against the Philadelphia Phillies. We will get to that at the end of the show. But the opening game of this 3-game set with the Toronto Blue Jays was the complete opposite end of the Tylor Megill experience. There's the Megill experience where he struggles and you wonder if he's going to be able to put it together. And then the other end is a Tylor Megill that goes out there and gives you 6 innings with 9 strikeouts and is basically his version of perfection. And my immediate takeaway from that great start, and it is a great start at a key moment for this team. They needed him to be that version of himself, and he was. But the issue I have, Jack, is I don't think the team believes in him to give them that going forward, because he's supposed to be the scheduled starter on Sunday. And before the game on Wednesday, they asked Carlos Mendoza what the rotation was going to look like. He left Sunday open for interpretation, said, yeah, we got to talk to some guys. You and I were texting back and forth of what that could potentially mean. And they're moving David Peterson into that spot. So they don't trust Tylor Megill to start a important game against the Philadelphia Phillies. They have him slotted in a game against the Washington Nationals early next week. That's at least my takeaway, is they don't trust him in that big of a spot right now. Yes, great start for him. Really the first time I think he's gone 6 innings with 1 run or fewer, dating back to that 7-inning start that he had against the Dodgers at the beginning of the season. He hasn't had a start like he did against Toronto. And I think the New York Mets want to do 2 things. One, they want to have their 3 best pitchers, or at least 3 pitchers they feel comfortable with starting the series against Philadelphia. And secondly, I think they want to do this to build confidence for Megill if they need to ask him to make some key outs late in the season or ultimately potentially in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, going into the Blue Jay series, one thing that I said was that for Megill, the key is going to be getting depth and just kind of letting him build some confidence against a team that's not necessarily one of the better lineups. And I mean, not only did he give depth, his performance was just incredible. 9 strikeouts in that game, like you said. But going forward into the Philly series, it's looking like the Mets don't fully trust Megill for a series against a first place team. And I don't know if it's hard to blame them, just given, we've watched Megill for several years now, and this kind of inconsistent ups and downs is something that we've been getting used to with watching Tylor Megill pitch. And I don't really blame Carlos Mendoza. I don't really blame the Mets staff, the Mets pitching decision makers for pushing his start back to another lighter opponent rather than, season not really on the line yet, but a massive series coming up against the Phillies. You want to have the guy that's been more consistent recently, and that's been David Peterson. We'll talk about what happened in game 2 a little bit later. But right now, Peterson looks like the clear, consistent performer, guy who can get depth and pitch well against a really solid team.
Well, and add to it, right? Take Sean Manaea off the table because he pitched in the game on Wednesday and delivered another ace start. We'll get to that when we talk about game 3. But if you were going to pick the next 3 pitchers, assuming Sean Manaea is not available, the 3 pitchers you would pick to pitch against the Philadelphia Phillies would be the recent version of Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, and David Peterson. Those would be the 3 you would pick, and those are the 3 that the Mets have going in this start. You'd like to have Sean Manaea here, but he pitched a very important game for you on Wednesday, and so that card's not available to Carlos Mendoza. So with what's left, the 3 guys that they are going to run out there in that series, and we're kind of blending the series recap and the series preview here, but those are the 3 guys that you want on the mound. So I'm not surprised they ultimately made this decision. But again, he had a good start, and I think this is more so about building confidence for him, because he was able to have that two-seamer and his four-seamer working both to the lefties and the righties. And I think they want him to build on that confidence. The last thing you want him to do is to enter a series where he's got to face Kyle Schwarber and get lit up the way Kyle Schwarber does to everybody in baseball. And then that confidence go away when if Paul Blackburn can't come back, if Christian Scott isn't close, then they're going to need Megill to give them some innings. So they need to build his confidence, and I think what they did here is a version of that. So that's game one. Tyler Megill does a great job, gives the team exactly what they need. And look, the offense struggled in this series. Other than the ninth inning in game three, it was non-existent. They were going to be on the side of a milk carton. Have you seen the Mets offense? Like, they were missing. It was MIA. They win game one because of the Blue Jays bullpen being an absolute dumpster fire. That's the only word I can use to describe the Blue Jays bullpen. It was a dumpster fire. In both Mets wins, it was directly as a result of the bullpen being a mess for the Toronto Blue Jays. They get a pass ball and a wild pitch that lead to 2 runs. They're able to win game one. We could talk about game two now. The David Peterson revenge, or the David Peterson regression game was in full swing. It was everything that could go wrong, did go wrong for David Peterson. Did not have command of the fastball, right? We know he's been trying this year and he's been doing it very successfully. Fastballs up in the zone and then all of his breaking stuff kind of down in the zone. That's been his attack path for these starts. Well, the fastball was up. It was just too up. It was way up. And there was just no competitiveness in some key spots with that fastball to make the hitters have to at least honor the pitch. He didn't have it. The third inning was a complete meltdown. He kind of started it with his flip to first base that went up the right field line. And then it just kind of unraveled from there. And he was able to kind of settle down in the fourth, but couldn't give the team length. Shout out to Huascar Brazaban. Second straight podcast. We've been giving him some love because he comes in and gives you 2 innings of relief. And so you don't have to blow through your entire bullpen, which is fantastic. You were able to get those guys, a couple of those guys, an important day of rest while you're playing. And look, this was bound to happen with David Peterson. This doesn't mean David Peterson's a bad pitcher. It doesn't mean David Peterson's not going to go out on Sunday against the Phillies and be the version of himself that he was prior to this. I think Mets fans in particular, maybe this extends out to baseball fans, and I love your thoughts on this, Jack. Not everybody can be an ace. Not everybody can be Jacob deGrom where every single start is magical, where every single start is they're going to do 7 innings, 1 run or fewer, and they're just always going to win, right? And David Peterson was doing that, right? The Mets had won 14 of his 17 starts, but it wasn't because he was dominant like a Garrett Cole or Jacob deGrom or Paul Skeens. That's not who he is. So this was bound to happen. And he's going to get a nice bounce back opportunity because he understands the pressure and magnitude of Sunday's game. So he's going to be amped up and ready to go to get right back out there.
Yeah, I think the Mets fans and baseball fans who have watched the Mets in the Jacob deGrom era were spoiled during that time period with not just deGrom, but guys like Zach Wheeler who were stepping up, Matt Harvey. The Mets have had a lot of quote unquote aces over their recent history, especially. And when you look at what David Peterson did, for a lot of the middle part of the season, it was kind of looking like he might be the guy to step up in Kodai Senga's absence. Obviously, since then we can talk about Sean Manaea a little bit and how good he's been.
Our ace, Sean Manaea.
Our ace, Sean Manaea. But David Peterson, this start looked a lot more like the David Peterson of years past, which meant a lot less control, a lot more, full counts, a lot more getting too deep and getting too high of a pitch count early in the game because he can't locate his fastball. He's not able to put guys away because of, either lack of control or some errors in the field between him and fielders behind him. I felt like every time the ball went off the wall, the Mets outfielders had no idea how to play a carom. And so that's just something that's a struggle or it's a struggle start for David Peterson. And there's a small part of me that's scared that we're not going to be able to trust what we saw from David Peterson earlier in the season before this series going forward down the stretch. And the Mets need him to continue to pitch the way he had been pitching before this game against the Blue Jays if they want to, stay competitive in some games against some really tough lineups coming up.
The Mets are not going to survive if they are just relying on Sean Manaea and Luis Severino to get them there.
Right.
That's just not the way it's going to work. Those two guys are great, and they're going to do a lot for them, but they are going to need other people to step up. It has been David Peterson and Jose Quintana for a large stretch of this season, and it has also been David Peterson. The starting pitching has been the strength of this team. When the offense has been missing, like I said, we were going to have to put it on the side of a milk carton if the 9th inning in Game 3 doesn't happen. The reason why they have the best record in baseball since like the end of May, the best record in all of baseball, they're the best team in all of baseball since like the end of May, is because they've had 5 really good starters that have constantly, more often than not, given them the outings that they have needed. And so they are going to need David Peterson to get back to, I don't want to say the version that he was in his last start prior to this one against Toronto, but the version that where they won 14 of the 17 starts that he won, that's the version they need. That's the version of it. And there's no reason to think that that's not the sample size that we should buy into, and that this one game sample size in 2024 is going to be the new norm. We will see. And again, a big time matchup. It looks like it's going to be David Peterson against Christopher Sanchez in that Sunday game. That's going to be fun because you look at the way the pitching matchups, and again, not to do the preview ahead of the preview, but you look at those first two games and it kind of sets up for a split. It sets up for Nola to kind of win the first one, Sevy to win the second one, and it's all going to come down to potentially Sunday, and then you're going to put the ball in David Peterson's hands. Loved everything he said post-game. I feel like his confidence is different than it was in years past, and I think he's going to be able to bounce back from a blip like this. But okay, let's talk about Game 3, and we will start a conversation with our ace, Sean Manaea. This dude's warming up from the opposing side, rubber throwing across the entire bullpen. This guy's turned into prime Chris Sale. He's lowered his arm slot. You name it, Sean Manaea has been doing it to create what has been a repertoire that is, you don't use this term very often, Jack. I'll use it. He's been unhittable since he's made these adjustments. He has been unhittable. Yeah, he's got these blips every now and again where he gives up a home run late, but more often than not, the dude is just nails. He is just spotting everything. The sweeper's working. He's throwing his fastball. Everything is just clicking for him right now. And he is the ace of this staff this year. He has been so consistent, so reliable. He has been absolutely awesome. And yesterday, or Wednesday's start, was no different. He went out there and gave this team everything they need. And I texted you at one point. This was it was like I was watching Jacob deGrom. He was going to give up one run, go 7 innings, and he was going to lose the game. It's just peak Jacob deGrom Mets fandom. I'm like, they're going to do this to Sean Manaea. We're back. We have an ace who can't get run support. We are so back.
Yeah, it felt exactly like a Jacob deGrom game, especially because in those Jacob deGrom starts, every time that the opposing team scored a run, it was because of, maybe 1 inning or half of an inning. There's a little bit of a lack of control. For Manaea, it was a couple hard hit balls and then a 4-pitch walk and then a sac fly. Like there's nothing you can do when, you can't be perfect the whole time. He had to do what he could to keep the Mets in the game because the offense was just not playing well. But there were moments that, like you said, it just felt like a deGrom game because of how dominant he looked, especially with that sweeper is just dirty. Like he was getting swings and misses on that, and he has been for a long time. And then, you look at the numbers with the 8 strikeouts and 3 hits, 2 of them, that back-to-back in the same inning. That's as good as you can ask for. And the lack of control was just something that kind of came at the end. He just kind of ran out of gas, I think, because he reached the pitch, a higher pitch count than he had all season. That's okay. I'm not that worried. I'm not concerned about, the lack of command at the end of that outing. And, he got the backup that he needed from Reed Garrett to end that inning in the 7th. And there's not a lot to say, man. Like he's just been an ace. He's just been so good. And it's been the kind of performances that the Mets have really needed as an anchor to the rotation. Well, like we said last episode, Kodai Senga has been out and will be probably for the rest of the season.
And when you use the term ace, you talk about the domination, right? You talk about somebody being dominant, but I think the other thing too is he's the stopper, right? Like they lost the day prior and they can't afford even a 2-game losing streak. They can't afford it. It will sink them in a race that every night the numbers look different. Right? Like to use a New York analogy, it's like when you're standing down at Penn Station or the old Penn Station and the flipboard changes to show you what track you're on to go get your train. That's the National League wildcard standings. Like it changes every day and the numbers are different. And they're sometimes a game and a half behind the Padres and they're a game and a half up on the Braves or they're a half game. It changes constantly. They can't afford a 2-game losing streak. Sean Manaea knew that. Sean Manaea understood the pressure of that environment and the importance of that game and went out there and shoved. He was just absolutely at his best. And it leads me to a conversation that I want to have here with you. And I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse here, but this dude has been everything you've needed to be at a starting pitcher in New York. It is difficult to pitch in New York. I can think of countless examples, both on this team and the other team across town, of guys that have come here and have shrunk in this market and have shrunk meeting this moment. Sean Manaea, a guy who was bouncing around the league, was in San Francisco, kind of found something late in the year last year in San Francisco, but they weren't using him as a full-blown starter where he was going 6-7 innings. Mm-hmm. The Mets pick him up on this deal. They work with him. He becomes the ace of this team and is pitching really well. He's handled the media well. He's talked about loving it here. He's talked about how it would be easy for him to come back. He wants to talk to the Mets. He wants to be back. And we know in the offseason, Jose Quintana is probably not going to be here. We know that this team is probably going to be interested in some big name starting pitchings, Corbin Burns. So I ask you this question, Jack. Should the Mets want to bring back Sean Manaea for 2025 and beyond?
I think it's a no-brainer, yes. For me, it's a no-brainer, yes. When you look at what he's been able to do since, that mechanical change that we talked about, dropping the arm slot, he's looked like, for all intents and purposes, he looked like Chris Sale, who's going to win the Cy Young this year, by the way, in terms of just
how did the Braves do that? How did the Braves, I just real quick, how did the Braves just trade for Chris Sale, who couldn't stay healthy, couldn't get out of his own way in Boston, and now he's just going to win the Cy Young?
I don't know. They have devil magic. You look at like what Whit Merrifield has done for that. I don't understand how they do it, but it's like every player. But the way that the Mets have been able to kind of, take Sean Manaea and develop him into the starting pitcher, the ace that he's become, it's a no-brainer. He clearly likes working with this pitching staff, this pitching development lab, because he's turned himself back into a elite level starting pitcher. And, the Mets are going to have to deal with, he's probably going to opt out now. He has a player option for 2025. And realistically, based on the recent run of performances he's had, he's going to opt out and he's going to be able to get a little bit more money. But I don't have any problem with that. Just looking at what the rotation is going to look like next year, I think he could be a very clear 2 or 3 starter, depending on how Kodai Senga and Luis Severino slot in.
I'm going to do something that you're never supposed to do in podcasting, but I'm going to do research on the fly as I talk. So bear with me here, Jack, as I do this.
Sure.
But I just wanted to look at something. So Manaea obviously has the opt-out at the end of after this season. He's on the books for 14.5 for this year. If he opts into the deal, it would be for 13.5 next year. Let me just let everybody know real quick. That's not happening. If you want Sean Manaea back, it's going to be at a number much larger than 13.5. But Jack, the thing I wanted to look at is, what do we think the number could be? What do we think the number is for Sean Manaea? And I'm not going to hold you to this. I'm doing a little bit of a thought exercise here of this team's going to have a lot of money coming off the books. They've got $31 million coming off the books for Max Scherzer. They've got $26 million coming off the books for Justin Verlander. They have $17.5 million that's going to come off the books for 2025 because he's not going to hit the innings limit in Houston. Do you just take the 17.5 that was going to go to Houston for Justin Verlander and you say, here's Sean Manaea, we're going to make that your AAV for a couple of years and we'll bring you back? No harm, no foul. You were already expecting it anyway.
Listen, I don't hate it. And I think when you look at just the value, again, the value that he's brought to the team is, I think, worth more than the 14.5 you said that they're paying him this year. Like, there's no way he's taking the 13.5. And looking ahead to next year, like you said, there's so much money coming off the books that you might as well give some of that to a guy that's tried and true, can perform in New York, likes the pitching staff and the development lab that he's worked with, the one that's essentially reinvigorated his career. I don't know off the top of my head how old Sean Manaea is, but it's not a problem for me to give him, 2 or 3 years at 17-ish million.
He's 32. He'll be 33, I believe, before the season starts. So you could give him a 2 or 3 year deal. But Jack, to just, and again, this is why we're very excited of what this podcast is going to look like in the offseason, because we're going to do a lot of these type deep dives. But because we're talking about Manaea and the great start that he had yesterday, this team's payroll this year, according to Fangraphs, is $335.9 million. It drops next year. Now, this arbitration and renewing contracts, so this is not a set number, but it automatically is going to drop to $159 million. David Stearns is not going to be able to. He's one of the best executives in baseball. He's not going to be able to spend $190 million in one offseason. It's just not going to happen. There's not enough good players out there.
Give it all to Juan Soto.
Give it all to Juan Soto. Then Sean Manaea doesn't have anything, and we can't bring Sean Manaea.
You're right.
But like, even if they give Juan Soto $60 million a year, which is a number that I've heard floated, that gets them to 210. They still have 120 before they reach this year's number.
Yeah.
So Sean Manaea, this is not the be all end all, but he's making 14.5 this year. And Fangraphs does a really cool thing where they give, based on what your performance is, they give you a dollar value of what you are actually worth compared to everybody else in the league. His value this year is 20.6. If you told me you could sign Sean Manaea to a 3-year, $60 million contract, put the paper in front of him right now. Get me Sean Manaea on my team for the next 3 years at $20 million per year. There's no reason to not. And you bring Kodai Senga back. I think there would be another pitcher that would be brought in. So you're going to ask Sean Manaea to be your 2, maybe your 3, depending on the quality of pitcher that you bring in, Corbin Burns. Okay, I'll pay a number 3 starting pitcher like Sean Manaea $20 million a year. In today's baseball, absolutely.
Well, the thing that also I start thinking about is bringing back Luis Severino, given how good he's been this year, as someone who, entering the season was coming off of 2 years where he was missing a lot of time, not pitching a lot of innings. And, for a large part of the early half of the season, he was the guy that kind of looked like the Mets ace throughout the early part of the season. And being able to bring him back with the same kind of, like I said, with Manaea, the same pitching lab, the same staff, working with Jeremy Hefner still, I feel so confident now in not just those 2 guys, but other potential reclamation projects, guys who have missed time recently. We texted the other day,
yes.
Walker Buehler.
I said this to you. This has been a long-standing thought that I've had, that the New York Mets and what they've been able to do with Sevy and with Manaea is going to embolden them in a good way to think we can do this with other people.
Absolutely.
And there are 2 names in free agency, Walker Buehler and Shane Bieber, that immediately jump off the page to me of the Mets should swim around in those waters. And you know what? If they keep the lab in place and they keep the pitching staff in terms of the coaching staff in place, why wouldn't you bet on them to be able to fix those guys or give those guys really nice landing spots and work on stuff with them? And to me, if that's what the Mets become, where they have a really good infrastructure, they have really good player development, and then they can bring guys in and, you know what? We're just going to tweak this one thing. How about you throw this more and throw this less? And now all of a sudden you're back to being the Walker Buehler of years past. Oh, if the Mets become that, then and I know this has become a running joke for people outside of Mets land, they then become Dodgers East, because that's what the Dodgers do. The Dodgers traded for Michael Kopech, and he's been an elite reliever since they got him because they've just made a couple of tweaks. This is what they do. This is what the Mets are trying to be. And they are proving to you on what is a smaller scale right now, they can do it. They took an off-injured Luis Severino and made him their second best pitcher. They took a guy in Sean Manaea who was kind of figuring it out as a starter in San Francisco, and they turned the dial up to 12. Reed Garrett came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, there was countless. Harrison Bader stayed healthy for the first time ever in his career. Like, the Mets have some type of secret sauce working right now.
And it's not just, the guys that we've mentioned out of the rotation. You've mentioned Reed Garrett. Another example that they brought up on Ryan Stanek, a guy that, he came over and there were issues with his mechanics. He was stepping too far over to the third baseline and he was kind of having to throw across his body. They've since fixed it. And I mean, shout out to Ryan Stanek in game 1 of the series, getting 3 massive strikeouts, including working out of a 3-0 count to maybe George Springer, who was leading off.
I think it was Vladdy you texted me.
I think he started 3-0 to, is their 9-hitter? Someone he started 3-0 and then came all the way back and struck them out, and then struck out Vladdy, and then struck out whoever was after. Maybe that was Springer. But it was just like stuff like that where we talked, last episode. They're not bringing in these household names that everyone's getting excited about, like Michael Kopech to LA. They're bringing in guys that they think they can tweak some mechanics, get them to change some parts about their repertoire. And based off of this season, based off of the first year of this David Stearns era and what they've been able to do development wise, especially with the pitching staff, is gives me so much confidence going forward that they can keep doing this.
Right. Everybody in baseball wants to do it. The Mets are showing you that they can do it. And that's a really good sign for the future, because you pair that with an owner who's willing to spend $335 million, and now you become something that's sustainable over large stretches. Okay, we somehow, in all the Manaea talk, have not gotten to the 9th inning, and we still also have to preview a series with the Phillies in like 7 minutes. So we're going to try to do it both. But that 9th inning, I don't think I can remember a bigger hit during a season than that Francisco Lindor. Like, in terms of impact to a team's season, that home run to tie the game. And by the way, credit Francisco Lindor. Immediately after the game, he's like, I didn't do anything. I just tied the game. Everybody else did the work to win the game. Yeah. Like, that's just being a leader. That's being the MVP. That's being the captain of the baseball
MVP
team.
stuff.
Like,
that's MVP stuff.
Right. That's the kind of stuff that you just can't teach. Like, that's just, you're born with that, and you're just a natural leader. And Francisco Lindor is that leader. And by the way, I never, ever, 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 ever want to hear in April when he has a slow start. I just don't want to hear it. Just put it to the side. The dude is amazing. He is an MVP. He's going to get first place votes. I think it's going to be closer than people think. I think there's a outside chance that he actually wins the thing, especially if he gets this team to the playoffs. If he goes on a stretch where they close the gap on the Phillies and he plays well in these series where everybody's watching them take on the Phillies, I guarantee you the conversation is going to ramp up. And so that home run, and then they just work good at bat after good at bat against the bullpen. And then the big thing, Francisco Alvarez finding the power, going to deep center field, 440 off the bat. Are you kidding me? Like, they need him to kind of get hot here. And so that inning was just it was the most Metsian roller coaster ride of all time. It was the lowest of lows. We're going to get no hit in September. I said it to you. Reminds me of 2015 getting no hit and then going to the World Series. I was trying to find the positive spin, and then with one swing, and real quick to let the listeners in, Jack and I were texting throughout the game, and Jack was ahead of me the entire game, and I didn't tell him that he was ahead of me. So when the 8th inning was over and I saw that it was over, I turned my phone over so Jack wouldn't spoil anything for me if the no-hitter happened or if the Mets came back. And the Lindor home run, I don't think I've like jumped as high out of my chair as I did when he hit the home run. And then I turned my phone over to see that I had 5 missed texts from Jack. It was just an incredible moment, an incredible 9th inning. And then they shut the door, and what was going to be a disaster and what was going to be a disaster podcast has now turned into, this team took 2 out of 3. They've won their last 5 series, and now they go and play the big boys in Philly feeling really good about themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we talk all year about, and we've said it probably to each other multiple times over the season, that was the biggest win of the season, or that was the biggest moment of the season. That Francisco Lindor home run was, to this point, the biggest moment of the season. Yep. That win, after being no hit for 8 innings against Bleav and Francis, who, credit to him, he has been unreal the last few weeks since he's been
2 no-hit bids into the 9th inning. He's taken 2 separate no-hit bids into the 9th inning.
Unreal. But that game, everything about it, from the start of the 9th inning at least, everything about it is something you can point to and be like, this is a team that deserves to make the playoffs now. Like, I strongly believe that teams that are worthy of making a playoff run are teams that are able to do stuff like that can come back from 8 no-hit innings, then come back from an entire weekend of not being able to hit anyone, really. I mean, you look at even game 1, the way they were able to put that comeback together that win together was not because of great hitting. It was because of luck and wild pitches and errors and walks from the bullpen. You talk about the bad bullpen effect in game 3, sure, but we have to talk about also the offense coming alive. It wasn't just the Lindor home run. It was the Alvarez home run as well, the Tyrone Taylor double. And there were signs even throughout the game, even while they were being no hit, that the luck was starting to turn around, that things were starting to change. The Harrison Bader ripped ball down the left field line that Davis Schneider catches up against the wall in left field.
The right after Lindor hits the home run, Iglesias hits a ground ball that should easily be out number 1. It gets thrown into the 3rd row, and now we've got the go-ahead run on second base with nobody out. And you could, honestly, in years past, the Mets are on the other end of that, and you were sitting at home going, well, here we go. And when that happened, was on the other end of it and said, oh, they're going to win this game. Like, those things don't happen to old Mets teams. This team's different. This team has something special going about them. And I said it in a tweet afterwards. Like, those are the types of wins and moments that when you look back on a season and something special happens, and I'm not going to say what special means. It can mean different things to different people. But when we talk about a season being above expectations and a team potentially going on a run like other teams last year did, in both the American and National League, you point to moments like that where like everything went the way. This team went 0-5 to start the year. This team was 11 games below 500. They'd have a players only meeting at the end of May. And since then, they've been the best team in baseball. They had 2 games like that against the Reds where they just squeaked out victories. And then they do it in the finale of the series against Toronto. So just an incredible effort. Vibes are immaculate. Couldn't be higher right now for this team. And they need them because it's Jose Quintana against Aaron Nola on Friday. It's Luis Severino, Colby Allard on Saturday. And then Sunday is David Peterson sliding into the TBD spot that was probably supposed to be Tyler McGill. And he's going to take on Christopher Sanchez. And so 3 games against the Phillies in Philly here this weekend. Then they get the Phillies in the middle of the week, Thursday through Sunday next week. And so, Jack, I guess I'll ask the question this way. What are your expectations for the series? What do you want? I think winning the series might be too much to ask, but you're kind of looking at it like you got to continue to win series.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I need to see is this offense continuing to step up. And like I said, that 9th inning was kind of the culmination of things starting to look like they were coming around in game 3 of that Blue Jay series. I want to keep seeing that. I know Aaron Nola is consistently, a great pitcher. I know Sanchez has been consistently, solid. I want to see the Mets attack the starting pitching. I want to see them attack the bullpen. I want to see this offense get me excited the way they had been for the 9-game win streak, even before that throughout August, a team that I can have faith in. If they go down early to a really, really good Phillies lineup, they're going to be able to battle back. I really want to see the offense stay hot. And on the flip side, for pitching, I just want to see more solid performances from Quintana. I hope he keeps up what he's been doing recently. Same with Severino. I hope Peterson can have a return to form in that last game of the series, which might, like you mentioned earlier, end up being the rubber match of this series.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see the game plan from Jose Quintana. It feels like he's been switching it up throughout the year as things have felt different levels of comfort with certain pitches, right? There was a decent stretch throughout the year where he just started using his curveball more than he's ever in his career, and it was just confusing everybody. And so hopefully the game plan is really good on Friday because they're going to need it. They're going up against Aaron Nola. They're going to need quality pitching to stay into that game, to get into the bullpens, and hopefully they're able to outlast the Phillies there. But yeah, the other thing too is you just want to see David Peterson bounce back, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to see him be able to flush what happened in Toronto and be a better version of himself and closer to the version that we've seen throughout the first 17 starts of the year. Look, I don't want to be the guy that says, oh, just don't get swept, right? That's what I'm hoping for. Win the series. You're a good baseball team. You're the best baseball team in all of Major League Baseball since your players only meeting at the end of May. That's a large enough sample size for me to say, you know what? You could take 2 out of 3 from the Phillies.
Sure.
You absolutely can take 2 out of 3 from the Phillies. You've got 3 pitchers. I'd like Manaea in there, but you got 3 pitchers that I believe in, where at least 2 of them should be able to get it done. So win another series, make it 6 series in a row, continue to put pressure on the Braves, continue to put pressure on the Padres and Diamondbacks, who, by the way, play the final 3 games of the year against each other. So you keep those teams close. The opportunities are going to be there. So just a fun end to a series in Toronto that we did not think was going to happen, but the Mets continue to pull tricks out of their hat. And, you know, the song says it all. OMG, oh my God, because this team just continues to just be absolutely magical when it has been required. So a huge series coming up against the Phillies on the road, starting depending on when you're hearing this. If you're hearing this on Thursday, tomorrow night in Philly, if you're listening to this on Friday, tonight when they take on the Phillies. We'll be back after the series concludes on Sunday or Monday morning with a podcast recapping the Phillies series. So that's going to do it for us here on episode 2. But the vibes immaculate in this new era of the Bleav in the Mets podcast. For Jack McKessie, I'm Chris Schubert. We'll talk to you guys next time. Let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.